"Bandits on her 6! Take her down!" The scream echoed through the radio. 4 F-16 swarmed a lone aircraft. In the cockpit, the female pilot sat silent, her hand gripping the control stick tightly. Radar warnings shrieked continuously, locking on target. Just when it seemed like there was no escape, the radio thundered with her voice. "This is Raven 6. Break off." Now. The entire F-16 squadron froze. No one expected that call sign to still exist. Her name was Reina Vasquez, 28 years old with long brown hair and a determined face. Despite her slender frame, her eyes held the depth of entire skies. Former call sign, Raven 6. She had once been a legendary A-10 pilot, famous for her ground support missions. After one failed mission that cost many teammates their lives, Reina was demoted and transferred to simulator training duties. On base, she was treated like someone whose time had passed. "She's only good for teaching theory now," officers would whisper in the corridors. "Raven 6's day is over. This is the era of F-16 and F-35s," another would add, with dismissive certainty. During one briefing, an officer stated bluntly, "We don't need hogs and old pilots anymore." Reina remained silent, offering no defense. She simply bowed her head, her fingers gently touching the faded Raven 6 patch on her uniform. In the mess hall, young airmen would snicker when they saw her eating alone at a corner table. "Look, it's the simulator lady," one would joke loud enough for her to hear. "I heard she used to fly combat." "Hard to believe," another would respond, shaking his head. But every morning, Reina would walk past the hangar and stop for a long time in front of a 10-tail number 201 covered in dust and neglect. The newer pilots would rush past her toward the gleaming F-35s and F-16 in the main hangars, their conversations filled with talk of advanced avionics and precision weapons. "Modern air combat is about speed and stealth," she overheard one instructor telling his students. "Ground attack aircraft like the A-10 are relics from a different era." The students nodded eagerly, their eyes bright with ambition. They wanted to fly the fastest jets, engage in air-to-air combat, be the knights of the sky. None of them wanted to learn about close air support or ground attack tactics. It seemed beneath them, too dirty, too old-fashioned. "Ma'am," one young pilot had once asked her during a simulation session, "why do we still need to learn about the A-10? Aren't precision strikes from high altitude much more effective?" Reina had paused the simulation and turned to face him. "What happens when your precision weapons fail? When weather grounds your high-tech aircraft? When soldiers on the ground need someone to stay and fight?" The young pilot had shrugged. "Ma'am, with modern technology, those situations don't really happen anymore." Reina had nodded slowly, a sad smile crossing her face. "I hope you never find out how wrong you are." Every evening, she would walk past the flight line, watching the newer aircraft being prepped for missions while her old A-10 sat forgotten in the corner. A real detail, a female technician later recalled, she would touch the rusted wing of that old bird like she was touching an old friend. When I asked why she didn't give up, she just whispered, "Because someday the sky will need me." The mission seemed routine. A squadron of F-16 conducting reconnaissance along the border. Intelligence indicated light enemy presence and minimal air threats. Everything went wrong in minutes. Without warning, enemy aircraft swarmed from hidden positions, more than double their numbers. The F-16 found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Radar warnings screamed continuously, missile lock alerts filling the cockpits. The radio exploded with panicked voices. "We're swarmed! Can't shake them! Multiple bandits! Coming in fast from the east. I count 12. No, 15 enemy aircraft. A young pilot's voice cracked with fear. If no support comes, we're finished. Back in the command center, chaos erupted. Controllers frantically searched for available assets, but every F-35 and F-16 was committed to operations hundreds of miles away. We need immediate air support for Falcon Squadron, the duty officer barked into his headset. Negative, came the cold reply from command. All assets committed. No support available. Falcon Squadron is on their own, an officer announced grimly. The air is lost. Standing in the corner of the control room, Reina felt her heart stop beating. The radio crackled with increasingly desperate transmissions. Falcon 2, you've got 3 on your tail. I can't shake them. Missile warning. Missile warning. This is Falcon Lead. We're not going to make it home. When the entire control room fell silent, accepting defeat, Reina broke into a run. She sprinted across the tarmac toward the abandoned section of the flight line where A-10-tail number 201 sat motionless, covered in dust and leaked oil stains. That aircraft is decommissioned, the maintenance chief shouted, chasing after her. No one authorized a launch. Reina spun around, her eyes blazing with cold fire. Tonight, Raven 6 flies. Her hands moved with practiced precision over controls she knew by heart. The twin TF-34 engines roared to life, dust swirling around the aircraft like a desert storm. The old Warthog began rolling toward the runway, its systems coming alive after months of silence. Tower, this is impossible. A controller stammered, watching his radar screen. Hog 201 is moving. Confirm. Hog 201 is requesting takeoff clearance, came the bewildered response. I don't believe it, another voice whispered. She brought the old bird back to life. The maintenance chief stood frozen on the tarmac, watching the aircraft he thought would never fly again accelerating down the runway. Control! This is Hog 201, Reina's voice came over the radio, calm and steady. Requesting vector to Falcon Squadron's position. Hog 201, you are not cleared for combat operations, the controller replied uncertainly. Falcon Squadron is dying up there. Reina's voice cut through the static like a blade. I'm going to bring them home. The A-10 lifted off into the darkening sky, its navigation lights disappearing into the clouds. In the control room, stunned silence gave way to whispered conversations. Did she really just... Raven 6 is back in the air. After all this time, a real detail, an engineer later admitted, I started crying. Because from that moment, I knew the sky had Raven 6 back. The forgotten pilot was racing toward her destiny, carrying with her the hopes of an entire squadron that had been written off as lost. Above the clouds, old engines pushed forward through the night, carrying their pilot toward a battle that would remind everyone why some warriors never truly retire. In the sky above enemy territory, the F-16 squadron was being systematically destroyed. We can't hold them anymore, Falcon Lead screamed into his radio, pulling hard to avoid another missile. They're everywhere. The enemy pilots had them perfectly trapped. Every evasive maneuver was anticipated, every escape route blocked. Falcon 3 is hit. I'm going down. 2 more on our 6. We're out of flares. The enemy commander's voice crackled smugly over the radio. Take them down. No survivors. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, a shadow fell across the battlefield. From behind a wall of storm clouds, a 10-tail number 201 dove like a bird of prey, its distinctive silhouette unmistakable against the darkening sky. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon began to rotate, its 7 barrels spinning up with the sound of impending doom. What happened next became legend. B-R-R-R-R-R-R-T. The cannon erupted with the fury of 1,000 thunderstorms. 30-millimeter depleted uranium rounds tore through the enemy formation like a scythe through wheat. 2 enemy fighters disintegrated instantly, their debris raining down like metallic snow. B-R-R-R-R-R-R-T. Another devastating burst sent 3 more aircraft spiraling earthward in balls of flame. The radio, which had been filled with panic and despair, suddenly fell dead silent. Then, cutting through the silence like a blade, came a voice that made every pilot's blood run cold. "This is Raven 6. Break off. Now." The F-16 squadron couldn't believe what they were hearing. She's still alive?" one pilot whispered, his voice filled with awe. Those same pilots who had mocked her, who had dismissed her as irrelevant, now sat frozen in their cockpits. Reina maneuvered the Warthog with surgical precision, using her cannon's devastating firepower to slice through the enemy formation. Each burst was calculated, each maneuver deliberate. The enemy, who had been so confident moments before, now found themselves facing an opponent they had never encountered, an aircraft built to absorb punishment and deliver devastating close-range firepower. "What is that thing?" an enemy pilot screamed as his wingman exploded beside him. "It won't go down!" "I hit it 3 times. The A-10's titanium armor deflected hits that would have crippled lighter aircraft. Reina pressed her attack, methodically eliminating threats and opening escape corridors for the trapped F-16. "Break formation and follow my lead," she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "I'll clear a path. B-R-R-R-R-R-T." Another enemy aircraft vanished in smoke and flame. The tide of battle had completely reversed. What had been a massacre of American forces became a rout of enemy fighters. "Falcon Squadron, form up on me," Reina ordered, banking hard to cover their withdrawal. "We're going home." A young pilot, tears streaming down his face, keyed his radio. "She saved us!" Raven 6 actually saved us. Back at base command, the control room erupted in disbelief. "Confirm tactical display," the duty officer stammered. "Are we showing 12 enemy aircraft destroyed?" "Confirmed, sir. Hog 201 has eliminated the entire enemy squadron." The base commander's voice was barely a whisper. "She's back. Raven 6 is really back." In her cockpit, sweat dripping down her face, Reina spoke quietly into her microphone. "Not today. Nobody dies today." She continued to fly protective cover as the F-16s limped toward home, their formation tight around the scarred but victorious Warthog. "Raven 6, Falcon lead called over the radio, his voice thick with emotion. We don't know how to thank you." "Just get home safe," Reina replied. "That's thanks enough." The enemy forces, what remained of them, retreated in complete disarray. They had learned a hard lesson about underestimating old warriors flying older aircraft. As they crossed into friendly airspace, one F-16 pilot broke radio silence. "Control, this is Falcon 4. Request permission to say something." "Go ahead, Falcon 4. Today, we learned what a real fighter pilot looks like, and her call sign is Raven 6. A real detail, an F-16 pilot who survived later recounted, "We were prepared to die." But that call sign rang out, and the entire sky changed. I've never witnessed a steel storm like that. She didn't just save our lives, she reminded us what courage actually looks like. Reina landed as the sunset painted the runway crimson. A 10-tail number 201 taxied to a stop, smoke rising from its battle-scarred hull. Bullet holes dotted the fuselage, but the old bird had brought everyone home. There were no cheering crowds waiting, no celebration, just the profound silence of respect. The F-16 pilots who had once mocked her stood in a loose formation near the hangar, their heads bowed. As she climbed down from the cockpit, they approached slowly. "We owe you everything," one of them said, his voice barely above a whisper. Reina removed her gloves, her scarred hands gripping the faded Raven 6 patch on her flight suit. She looked at each of them, young faces that had aged years in a single afternoon. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. "We're all on the same side." But something fundamental had changed in that moment. The way they looked at her, the way they stepped aside as she passed. It wasn't pity or dismissal anymore. It was the kind of respect reserved for warriors who had proven themselves in combat. She walked past them without another word, disappearing into the shadows of the base. That night, in the command center, someone quietly hung the Raven 6 insignia back on the wall of honor. No official orders were given, no ceremonies planned. It simply appeared, like a ghost returning to its rightful place. The base commander found it there the next morning during his routine inspection. He stared at it for a long moment, reading the small placard that had appeared beneath it. Raven 6, Falcon Rescue, Squadron Saved. He left it hanging. In her quarters, Reina sat at her small desk, writing in her worn journal. "They thought I was finished. Maybe I thought so too. But today proved that some things never die. They just wait for the right moment to return. The sky called, and I answered. That's what we do. That's what we've always done." She paused, her pen hovering over the page. Raven 6 never really went away. She was just waiting. The next morning, young pilots walking through the command center would stop and stare at the insignia on the wall. Veterans would tell them about the day when a forgotten pilot in an old aircraft reminded everyone that legends don't retire. They just go quiet until they're needed again. And sometimes, when the situation is desperate enough, they return with a vengeance. The call sign lived again. People had once mocked the A-10. They had dismissed Raven 6 as a relic from the past. But when the sky belonged to the enemy, it was a forgotten pilot and her old aircraft who saved the entire squadron. The lesson: don't underestimate anyone just because they're quiet or seem to be past their prime. Sometimes they are the storm that changes everything. If you believe that forgotten people still deserve to be remembered, leave a dot below. And don't forget to subscribe to SN Quiet Stories, where we tell stories about people the world overlooked, but history must never be allowed to forget.